Hello, everybody. This is Anna and Brian from Amata podcast, and today we have our next guest for XR episode, Jed Ashforth, and who is the founder of Realized Realities and one of the creators of PlayStation VR. Hi, Jed. How are you?
Hi Anna, how you doing?
Good. It's a pleasure to have you here, and thanks for joining for this episode, the first video XR episode, actually. Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me. Your first video is my first ever podcast, so fingers
Oh,
crossed. I hope it goes
congrats.
well.
Yeah.
Exciting day
And
then.
and maybe just can you give a quick introduction to yourself and your background so our listeners know your story?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So, my name's Jed Ashforth. I come from a game design background. So, for kind of the last 25 years, I've been working in the games industry. The last 15 years of that, I've been working in XR almost exclusively. So, I came from a background working at PlayStation of being a game director. So, I was a game director on the Motorstone games and Drive Club and a few other projects as well. That we were working on. And then in 2010, I got invited to come and see a demo of an internal secret Skunkworks project that was going on, which turned out to be a very, very early version of Project Morpheus, which eventually became PlayStation VR. And so I got to try that. It wasn't my first time trying VR, but it was my first time in about 10 years since I'd kind of been out to the Trocadero in London or over to Disneyland and did the Aladdin thing there at Disney Quest. And it was fantastic. I was so excited to try it. It was absolutely hilarious, the hardware. It was two iPhones hanging off a head massager with lots of circuit boards and stuff. It really looked like something that Doc Brown had made in Back to the Future. It was like some crazy contraption, but it kind of worked. But what they had running in it was just the old Unity Island demo. I don't know if you remember that. And there was, it's lots of hills and walking across rickety bridges and stuff, and it should have been great. But it was horribly, nauseating, made everybody feel sick, and they couldn't figure it out. So I said, I'm available at the moment. I'd love to come and have a look at this. So I got on board and started looking at it. So that was kind of late 2010. I was brought on board. By about 2012, we were in a position where we'd got a programmer with us. We'd got a little team built up to kind of build a load of prototypes and try and figure this stuff out. Because what we'd found very quickly was, while there was a lot of past history about how to implement VR, how to make it so it didn't make people feel sick and things like that, a lot of that stuff was 20, 30 years old and from, military grade hardware that ran at 30 frames a second and had a field of view of 6 inches or something stupid like that. So a lot of it wasn't relevant, and we had to kind of start from scratch learning all that. So internally within Sony, for over about 2 or 3 years, we built up a big list of all the things that we thought this will be fantastic to do in virtual reality. Our players would love to try this. And then we went away and built them and tried them out and figured out what was working and what wasn't. And when we were starting to see patterns in the problems, we started to kind of figure out what were some of the problems in terms of comfort, user comfort, what were the things that were making people feel bad in VR, what were the things that worked really, really well. And all that was so that we could basically take this internally to Sony and sort of say, look, this is a really viable product. We should be making this. This should be part of the PlayStation family. And that's what we did. Once we kind of figured out all the best practices and the comfort best practices, then it was my job to go around. I got to fly all around the world, go to all sorts of conferences and tech conferences, go and see developers and things, and basically teach our developers, our existing developers who were making PlayStation games, how to make PlayStation VR games, what the difference was, what the different approaches need to be, how they need to change their pipelines and things like that. And so that's pretty much what I was doing up until 2017, which was just after PlayStation VR was launching. At that point, I decided it was a good time to kind of go on and find a new challenge. So that's when we set up the consultancy that I'm running now, Realized Realities. So yeah, that's my story, really.
I guess, yeah, when I guess you first encountered this technology, like what made you decide that, okay, this is the future, this is where I want to, I guess, continue working in, and I guess, yeah, building out a future with it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question because it was very primitive at the time. It wasn't everybody's first VR experience today is actually fantastic. Do you know what I mean? I envy people that get to try it for the first time today because it's so advanced and, you know, so much of the rough corners have been polished off. So much of it is comfortable and, you know, properly focused on being intuitive and easy to use that people's first experience now is absolutely fantastic. Back then it was dreadful. It was absolutely awful, honestly. You couldn't stay in there for more than a few minutes. But it was the fact that there were so many unknowns. Having come from years and years and years of working on flat video games and kind of becoming a very senior developer and designer in that area, I felt like, didn't feel like I had all the answers, but I certainly felt like I knew how to figure out all the answers and what the routes were to get those solutions. If you had a problem in a normal video game, you know, we kind of knew how to approach the solution. Whereas this was something completely different. There was a lot of things that we didn't understand, that we didn't have any past history with, in terms of how to integrate that into a game design practice, how to figure out where that fits within a game and within game development and how you solve these problems. So it was that side of it as much as anything. I'm very much a problem solver. I see a problem and I want to understand what's causing it so that I can then figure out how we can fix it. And that's kind of how I approach everything. I'm quite annoying if you spend any time with me because I tend to break everything down like that and kind of break it into pieces. But that's how I like to kind of understand the world. I hate these situations you find yourself in sometimes where it's like, I don't know how to do this thing, and worse, I don't know what the things are that I don't know. Do you know what I mean? I need to have that confidence going in. So I broke it all down and kind of factored out what were these issues, what were the patterns, you know, what are the things that are likely to trigger people to feel sick in VR, what are the things that work really well. It wasn't all just, you know, comfort stuff. There was a lot of things in there that attracted me as well about the possibilities of what could be done, what you could experience that you could either never afford to experience in real life, or you'd never be in a position to be able to kind of go skydiving through the Himalayas or whatever. You know, most people aren't that lucky. But also there's a whole world of things that we can't even imagine that, you know, developers come up with all the time. And it kind of, well, it's felt like a portal to something new, to something that nobody had ever seen before. And to be one of those kind of first explorers. Certainly VR's been around a long time, but VR gaming at that point, there wasn't a lot out there. So it's like, if this was going to be a new medium, this was going to be a new way for people to play games, that was extremely exciting to kind of be on the ground floor of that and kind of be figuring out what worked and what didn't, and what people would like and what people wouldn't like and everything. I live for that sort of stuff. So yeah, I couldn't resist, I've got to say, when they kind of offered me the role, even though I knew it was going to be a lot of work to kind of come in and figure all this stuff out, more or less from scratch, reading a lot of academic papers, and, you know, it was a bit of a slog. But I knew at the end of it that there was so much potential in virtual reality to kind of do things in gaming that we'd never seen before, and just so many new paradigms had to be defined, and so many old paradigms didn't apply anymore or had been broken by this technology, that it was just fascinating to think where it could go and, you know, what it could offer to players, and kind of just the emotions that it could invoke quite easily were very, very different from the emotions that we're used to invoking in normal video games. So it was this thing that was related to stuff I knew about, and yet at the same time it was a completely different, new, interesting thing to explore. So yeah, I absolutely couldn't say no when they asked me. I was just like, yes, please, that would be fantastic.
And can you tell us a little bit more about your current projects? And as well as just like, I think you do have some experience as well with mentoring. So how was that?
So also I do all sorts of things. My job's one of those things is actually, I always struggle to define it because I do so many different things along the way. There are so many bits to VR where I can help people. But so projects I've been working on mostly this year are all still under NDA, so I can't really tell you much about them. Recently, I've worked, in the last couple of years, I've worked on things like, you may be familiar with, there was a game called Unearthed that came out on the Quest from Factory 42, where you kind of get shrunk down to an insect size, and it's it's got a load of celebrity actors in it and stuff like that. That was really interesting. That was quite a big budgeted project and really high production values. That was great. Worked on a game called Borderbots VR, which came out last year. Helped them fit their story world and kind of get characters and things like that all working and being delivered in VR, because that was a medium that, while they were used to the medium of VR, they weren't used to storytelling in VR and kind of building out the characters. So they had this great core gameplay that they'd already defined, which is very much, it's kind of like Papers, Please, but with robots, and a robot uprising and things like that. So it's a really fun game, and they had the kind of actual bit where you're manning the booth, but the story behind that and what happened in between your work sessions was something they were really keen to explore. So I worked on that. So if you get to play that, that's had my touch on it as well. I worked with a few enterprise companies doing training things and stuff like that. There's a great company called Headset out there who do lots of training work for journalists and aid workers who are going into difficult locations, difficult areas in the world. So, places where there's civil unrest, places where there's been floods, places where there's been earthquakes and things like that. And they make simulation experiences as part of their training package. So being able to kind of work on that sort of stuff is fascinating, because, again, it's an entirely different set of emotions that they're trying to evoke in the user. And obviously VR is a very emotional medium, and it's a great tool for being able to produce situations that really resonate and kind of that the users can really feel like they're part of that world, part of that situation, and it's happening around them. So that's fascinating, working on things like that. We don't often get to touch on those sort of things when you're working on video games, for example. So lots of stuff like that, lots of mentoring, as you mentioned. I do lots and lots of mentoring. I really like doing mentoring. I kind of think it's one of those things that if you know something, especially VR is one of those areas that a few people know a lot about it, but there's lots of people out there that really want to learn about it, but the resources aren't already there. There's a million courses that will teach you how to program in Unity and make a VR game, but they won't tell you the design ethos behind how to make a good VR game. They don't kind of understand what the right approach is to kind of looking at your ideas and being able to go, okay, that will work, but that's going to be really problematic, and you should probably stay away from that. We know that stuff instinctively in normal video game development. But in terms of VR, there's a lot of things that people bring those existing assumptions in and think, oh, that's easy to do. We'll do that. That won't be a problem at all. And those things can sometimes turn out to be really, really challenging, and you're kicking yourself that you didn't kind of think of them earlier. So with a lot of teams and individuals, so this is from, big development teams at big companies all the way down to individual, 2-man, 1-man development teams that are just kind of either a startup or they're students or they're making small projects just for off their own back. A lot of the time, there's so much shortcutting that you can do by telling them a few key things and kind of figuring out what it is they want to build and pointing them in the right direction towards the solutions that work best in VR. I find that extremely rewarding. I feel like actually all this stuff I've learned, there's a use for it, there's an application, other than if this stuff just comes up in a project that I happen to be working on. There's a lot more chance with mentoring for me to be able to help people with that sort of stuff. And a lot of the time it's just little questions like, how do I do this? Or we've got a problem with this, what should we do? And it's great. I love to be able to just say, okay, go and have a look at this, or take a look at this game or this app and see how they handled that, because they were in the same situation you were in with the same set of variables that they were trying to deal with, and they figured it out this way. And a lot of the time in normal video games, somebody will be able to do that really easy, whereas in VR gaming and VR apps in general, people don't have that big purview of the overall landscape and kind of seeing all the stuff that's going on. So I try and do that. I try and play as many things as I can, experience as many apps as I can, because when clients come to me, that's normally what they're looking for. They're looking for a good example. Who's made this before? Is this something we can not copy the homework from, but take inspiration from and understand how they've solved certain problems that we might be running up against. So yeah, mentoring is really good. I love doing that sort of stuff. I do a lot of talks, do a lot of lectures, workshops. I consult with academia on course content and things like that. So all sorts of different things. And like I say, I don't really know what the job description is for all that. I call myself an immersive experience specialist, but somebody the other day actually said, what you are is something that's very familiar in the movie industry, and that's the punch-up guy. When your project gets in trouble and it's like, we've got 3 weeks left to shoot it and the script's not working, or we've filmed this and we don't know what to do with it, you bring in the punch-up guy that will go, okay, I understand how much time you've got, how much budget you've got left, what problems you're facing, and what result you'd like to get. And they figure out what you need to do to the script, or your production schedule, or whatever, to get that result and to get the best result you can get with all those variables that you're facing, all those constraints that you're limited by. So I think I'm going to start calling myself the VR punch-up guy, because that is pretty much a good example, a good description, of what it is that I do with clients. Even though it's a million different things, ultimately it's always about kind of elevating their experience, solving their problems, and making sure they can deliver to the highest standard, whatever it takes. But usually, not in a way that's going to cost them more time, more money, or need more resources. So always looking, well, there is a solution. Let's find it. Let's figure out what the right thing is.
Yeah, I think that probably succinctly captures what what you're trying to do. I like to hear that kind of phrase catch on a little bit, the punch-up guys. I don't think I've heard that much in like VR or tech or anything like that. Yeah,
I worry that if you say VR punch-up guy, it sounds like you make fighting games.
Yeah,
right?
I know. That's the only downside, but who knows? Use it enough, maybe they'll catch on.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, like, I guess as someone who's kind of been around and you've been involved in so many different projects, helping out with so many different initiatives, I guess what do you think is missing from the current state of VR, AR, and all these immersive technologies that that's stopping it from catching on with the wider community? Because it still feels like it's a very niche thing. Obviously, once you've experienced it yourself, you'll realize that, oh wow, this is amazing. This could be the future, etc. But it hasn't quite captured the imagination of everyone else. Like, what do you think is missing to take us, that to that next step?
I think you said it yourself there, Brian. To be honest with you, I think the core thing with VR is it's not for everybody, but it's really hard to try it. It's really hard to actually get an opportunity, if you've never tried it, to go and try it. And there's a number of things around that. One is, certainly since COVID, the idea of putting somebody else's personal tech equipment on your face is off-putting to people. So like that practice of, come around, we'll play some VR games, doesn't really happen so much in my experience, and from what I've heard from people. So that's kind of holding it back. It's like VR is very much the Matrix, right? You can't be told what it is. You really have to experience it to get it. It's one of those things. Everybody thinks they know what it is, and then they go, oh, that wasn't what I was expecting at all. And you hear that all the time. So I think that's the number one thing that it needs, is it needs more opportunities for people to try it. And so at the moment, we've always said, kind of since we first started on this, the way we sold it into Sony as a proposal was very much that this is going to be a snowball technology. It's going to roll really slowly. It can only grow when somebody tries it. And the only way you can try it is to put a headset on that somebody else has got, and they demonstrate it to you. So it's never going to explode. Nobody's going to be spending a load of money on these things in massive numbers at the start, because they won't know what it is that they're getting. They won't understand until you've tried it, and until there's enough people recommending it and going, you've got to try it, it's amazing, it's not what you think it is. Until we get to that point, it's always going to be this slow snowball. Now, I track these numbers, and I track, the size of the market and stuff over time. So I can see where, it's accelerating. Every now and again, the hill kind of flattens out again, and then it goes steep. And it's also at the mercy, very much at the mercy of investment. So Meta have been great at investing a load of money into it, ridiculous amounts of money to kind of, further the technology and advance the platforms. But again, they're kind of getting to the point now where they're sort of saying, oh, well, we can't get going with this forever. So they've kind of put a time limit on this year that they really want to get Horizon up and popular and working. And, some of that they'll be doing through the mobile app, some of it they'll be doing through VR. But that's another one of those factors where it's kind of like, okay, that's at the moment the big growth area in VR, and certainly in consumer VR, is Meta's headsets. And so if they kind of, we're not going to concentrate on that so much, we're not going to fund as many projects in that area, we're not going to help as many developers as we have previously, because our priorities have shifted, that'll change everything and kind of, affect the adoption rate. So it's also a really hard thing as a result to predict when this snowball's going to speed up. But it is getting faster all the time. And I kind of look at, take stock of it every year at the end of the year, when all the end of year reports comes out and the sales figures and everybody's quarterly earnings, and you can see all these things and how it's performing. And yeah, things are getting better. So I kind of think it's one of the things, it's like, be patient and we'll get there. That's just number one in terms of what holds it back. The other side of it is we've not solved all those problems yet with the comfort, with, you know, getting it on, not messing your hair up, not messing your makeup up if you wear makeup. You know, it's not always comfortable to put on and off. It's not always comfortable to wear for long periods. Everybody's head shape is different. Everybody's bridge of the nose feels the pressure in different ways, or on your cheeks or on your forehead. It's like, it's such a personalised fit that you need to get it right. Apple have approached that in a very interesting way, right? Because they will do a fitting, a personal fitting, and 3D printer, you know, a facial interface for your headset. But the downside to that is that then that stops me being able to share it easily with somebody else and demonstrate it to somebody else, because it's being tuned to me. So again, that's not going to help that snowball go any faster. It's always kind of going to be at this rate. But sooner or later, we'll get to a precipice where there's enough headsets out there, enough people playing on them, that, you know, being able to show it to somebody else will be quite normal. And that, at that point, I think we'll start to see mass adoption coming. But I'll be honest with you, it's surprising to me that it keeps slowing down when it does. It's so dependent on external investment. It's so dependent on what's the flavour of the month in tech. It was great 2 years ago when the metaverse was the hot thing, when Meta rebranded and everything. Business was fantastic, and, you know, the industry was accelerating very fast. Lots of investment, interest in it. And then kind of when AI came along, the metaverse idea went cold and people went off it. But now people are looking at integrating AI into VR. The funding's coming again. But, you know, there'll be something, I'm sure 6 months from now, there'll be something else that changes, and it will be, oh, we're in a little flat bit again on the slope. It'll get going. So I don't know, it's one of those things. I think we just have to be patient in the long term and just try and solve some of the user-facing problems that we can solve. Try and solve some of the comfort issues, some of the fit issues, some of the social stigma around how stupid you look when you're wearing it, and things like that. Those are things we can be working on. But, you know, in terms of the market adoption, I think we're way away from it being a mass market. We're way away from the smartphone moment, right? But we're certainly much, much further on than we were when we launched PlayStation VR back in 2017. So, you know, 6-7 years, I've seen massive amounts of advancement. And in terms of how far the technology's advanced, in terms of how far the headsets have come, the features that they offer and how well they work, how robust they are, how good the optical processing is on them and things like that. Everything is accelerating so fast. It's astonishing to me when I go back and look at my, you know, Oculus DK1 now and look through it with the 480p panel and things like that, that I ever thought that was magical, but it was. And I guess that's the other thing that just brings me round all the time to wanting to work in VR, is that I still get that thrill when I put it on. I still, when I try something for the first time, it still feels like it's magical. You know, when I get to try some of these new apps that clients send me, or new games that come out and stuff like that, I get that thrill every time. It's never gone away. I've never kind of got bored with it, or, oh yeah, I'm familiar with this now. It still feels like a wow moment every time. And I can't think of anything else in my life that offers that, I'll be honest with you. Don't let my wife hear me saying that, but, you know, it is definitely one of those things that is kind of like, for me, it will always have that magic, you know. So I'm in it for life, VR for life.
And like thinking of, you've mentioned a bunch of different companies and all their different approaches. I guess very quickly, what do you think, which hardware is the one that excites you the most? Because all of them have a slightly different approach to it. And I guess what's your personal opinion?
So it's hard to say, isn't it? They're all different. I mean, I look at things at a very deep technical level as well. So like, while there's a lot of things right with the Quest 3, for me, like the binocular overlap is a problem because of my eyesight and things like that. And the fit of the facial interface is a bit of a problem because of the shape of my face. So personally, my favourite headset at the moment is PlayStation VR 2. I absolutely love it. I think it's fantastic. It works really, really well for me. But again, it is one of those very personal choice things, and it all depends what experience you have in there. So I think the ones I'm excited about seeing, I'm very excited to see what Valve are working on. The Index was for the longest time just the far and away leagues better than everything else that was out there. It's still, in my opinion, got the best audio out of any headset out there. So I'm kind of very keen to see what they do, and they're in a very good position to kind of offer an independent option. Like, it's not really an open platform, but it's a platform that lots of people can easily publish and create content for. Whereas something like Meta, for example, you've kind of got to get published by Meta, especially since like SideQuest and AppLab have kind of fallen away a little bit. And so that's, that kind of limits, that's going to limit in the longer term what sort of things people want to bring to that platform. Because again, unless you're self-funded, all of these things you've got to get somebody interested in, sort of get somebody saying, oh yeah, I think that's going to do really, really well. I think it's going to be successful. I'm going to, back that. And that's just, it's hard to predict, especially on like a closed ecosystem like Meta's got. So a bit of an unknown question, but I'll tell you, there'll be another headset in a year or two that'll blow everybody away again, and it might be from a completely different manufacturer. Pico have been doing some great things. And some of the more boutique headset manufacturers out there have got some very interesting offerings that work really, really well for specific niche cases as well. So I can imagine a gaming first headset, which is kind of what PlayStation VR 2's focus is. You can't even do movie watching in there at the moment, right? It's just for playing games. I can see that will be something that for me would be absolutely the best thing. It's like, if it's totally focused in on making those best game experiences in VR with the best visuals and the best audio and the best level of immersion and haptics and stuff like that, that'll be the one that I'm interested in the most, the one that I'll get most excited for.
And I think maybe we can move to maybe your hopes and predictions for the future of immersive tech, as well as your own project. And maybe if you can share some piece of advice to those who want to create like VR games, what do they need to do to prepare themselves for this future that you see like in the next couple of years or in the next 5 years? So.
Yeah, that's a great set of questions. Okay, so the first question was kind of, where will we be, was it?
Yeah, just like, well, how do you see like the immersive tech is kind of like changing in the next like a year or two, or like you can choose your own time scale.
Okay, so where will immersive tech be in 10 years is probably a very hard thing to predict, to be honest with you. It moves so fast. I mean, I think back, and it was, 10 years ago we'd not launched PlayStation VR 1. 10 years ago, we were around about Oculus DK2, something like that, maybe CV1 days. Don't know. So, like I said, we've come so far from then. So, imagining where we'll be in another 10 years is, please don't hold me to any of these guesses. But what I would probably say is, I think XR will become more popular. I think it'll happen probably through wearables initially. I think that'll be the key that gets people adopting it. I think wearables that look like sunglasses are the key in. Once we deliver that with kind of, AI smart glasses and things like that, like Meta doing the Ray-Bans, I think people will then accept, okay, having a computer on my face isn't such a bad thing because look at all the ways it helps. And then it's a hop, a skip, and a jump from there into suddenly I'm, fully immersive gaming with the thing on my face. For a lot of people, I think that's what we'll see. So I think 10 years from now, we would definitely be at that point where there's a lot of people that have discovered it. Certainly kind of not as many as people have a smartphone, but as many as people as have sampled and used a smartphone, which is just about everything. I'd like to think 10 years from now, it'll be hard to find someone that's never tried VR. Some people like it, some people won't. But, there'll be enough people that do and really enjoy it that I think it's going to be a big, buoyant market, with lots of different hardware offerings, lots of different software options as well. I think we'll probably see lots of boutique and niche headset applications coming out where people buy a specific type of headset for a specific purpose, because I think, we see that in any other electronics. If you're, working on high-end Mac graphic design or something, there's very specific hardware you want for that. And I think we'll see that not only in terms of use cases for work use cases for immersive tech, but also just for the fun stuff. I think more people, I've often said this, but I think more people will have a VR room in their home, because it's so much better when you've got some space, right? When you've got a 2 meter by 2 meter square, that's fantastic and way better than standing still on the spot. If you can get bigger space than that, it's exponentially better. So I think those people that might consider having a dedicated room for a pool table, for example, or a dedicated crafts room or something in the house, I think there'll be a bunch of people out there that will have a dedicated VR room. And the best thing about a dedicated VR room is it's dead easy to make. You don't need to put anything in it. You don't need to furnish it. You know, as long as it doesn't look like a site when the doors open. Once you're in VR, you know, it's the space that you need. So I think we'll see a lot more outdoor applications. I think we'll see outdoor mixed reality being used a lot more. I think we'll see outdoor VR being used a lot more. I think there's a lot of new paradigms and opportunities there that have never been explored yet. So I think that'll be super exciting. And I think we're going to see there'll be a lot of concern over the coming decades, surely, about the amount of e-waste that's going on, because, you know, a lot of these headsets get replaced every year, every 2 years. There's a new model. There's always something better. And it took us a decade and a little bit with mobile phones before we got to the point where people aren't buying the latest handset every time one comes out. And I think, you know, the sooner we can get to that with VR, the better, because I think things will advance quick. I've got cupboards full of VR headsets that I have no idea what to do with. You know, you can't reuse them. Nobody wants them. You can't give them to them. So I think the idea of buying a component like a PC, where you upgrade components, you buy a better screen, you get new controllers, you upgrade the CPU, you put bigger RAM in it, that'll be something that, you know, somebody will do. And I think it'll be coming from an ecological basis of like, this is the responsible way that we should be doing this. And it's also a smart way because it lets people then build mods and improvise and do what they want with the hardware and create stuff. Creates a new marketplace. So that to me seems like that'll probably be likely. But as I say, 10 years is a long time. It's a geological age in immersive tech. So, you know, don't blame me if I'm completely wrong on all of these things. Don't go down to Ladbrokes and start betting on any of these things. That's all I'm saying. Keep your money in your pocket.
All right. And I think with that, that's probably a good place to bring the podcast episode to a close. But I'd like to leave the last minute or so for yourself, Jed, just to leave any last words for our listeners, or like, how can people find out more about the work you do? How can they get in touch if they have any more questions?
Okay, yeah. So if you want to get in touch with me, you can get in touch with me through my website, which is www.realizedrealities.com. You can get hold of me on Substack, Jed Ashforth on Substack. I write every week, write VR articles, game reviews, things like that. You can find me on LinkedIn. I am the only Jed Ashforth on LinkedIn, so it should be quite easy to find. And if you're interested in finding out a bit more about what I do and some of the work that I do, I've got a new ebook coming out at the end of next week. End of next week as we're recording this, so it'll be the end of February that it comes out, probably the 28th, Friday the 28th. And that's going to be aimed at people that are coming from existing media platforms like making movies, making TV and things like that, that are interested in learning how to tell stories immersively. So it's taking that, people that are basically bringing that knowledge of, I know how to tell linear stories, I know how to put a film together, I know how the production process works in a film, I know how all those bits fit. This is an ebook, it's a 50-page ebook that's designed for those people to explain, these are the differences with the immersive, this is how it's going to work differently, these are the other things that you have to think about. So bringing in things like agency, and, you know, the fact that you haven't got any control over the camera or the shot composition, things like that, introducing all those ideas. So if you're somebody that's coming from that background or just unfamiliar with VR, but familiar with how cinema works because you watch some films, it can be a really useful jumping on point and explain a lot of things. So that's called Breaking the Fifth Wall, and it will be out, as I say, 28th of February, all being well, fingers crossed.
Great. We'll be sure to include the links into the description for this podcast.
Awesome.
So you just, if someone is interested, just like you can click in there. But yeah, thank you so much for doing this episode with us.
Thank you for having me.
Really enjoyed it.
Great talking. Thanks, guys. Thank you very much.
And
Thank
thank you to
you.
all the listeners and our watchers. So yeah, have a great day.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.